Matt Henderson sat in the passenger seat of Ben Stevens' old Jeep as it rumbled down a winding road through the dense forest. Backpacks rattled in the trunk, soft indie music played from the speakers, and Izzy Reynolds, lounging in the back seat, kept throwing playful jokes at Ben. The road snaked lazily between the pines, and a light mist hung in the air, like a veil concealing something waiting to be uncovered. "Hey, Matt," Izzy called over his shoulder, giggling. "Did you bring that giant mug we gave you? You're not gonna survive tomorrow morning without your coffee." "Yeah," Matt mumbled, staring out the window. A strange sense of detachment settled over him. There was something too cheerful about his friends, so much so that it felt almost fake. Even though they weren't acting hostile, an uneasy feeling was building deep within him. Ben slowed the Jeep as they reached a fork in the road, where the pavement gave way to a narrow dirt path leading deeper into the forest. Matt heard Ben chuckle quietly to himself, as if he had made some private decision. "Oh, check this out," Ben said, turning the wheel left with a grin. "Let's take this road. I heard it leads to a lake. Fewer people, and we'll find a better spot to camp." Izzy playfully slapped his shoulder. "I'm in. A lake sounds perfect. Let's get in a swim before sunset." Matt's eyes narrowed. This sudden change of plans seemed off. The lake? They were supposed to camp closer to the main site. Something about this impromptu detour didn't sit right with him. "Are you sure we'll find it?" Matt asked, his voice low. "Relax," Ben replied with a smirk. "I've got a map, and I even marked this trail from last time." Matt tensed. "I thought you said you hadn't been out here before." Ben laughed. "I haven't, but people told me it's easy to find." "No big deal." Matt's hand tightened on the armrest. His eyes flicked between Ben and Izzy, scanning for any subtle clue, anything that might hint at what they were really up to. The forest grew denser, the sky above darkening as they drove deeper. The once friendly hum of conversation faded into an eerie silence, broken only by the crunch of tires on wet dirt. When Matt glanced at his phone, he noticed the signal was gone. No bars, no internet. What if it rains?" Matt asked, trying to sound casual but failing to mask the unease in his voice. "Even better," Izzy chirped. "More time by the fire with some warm wine." Ben and Izzy exchanged a quick glance, the kind of look that churned Matt's stomach. Something was definitely wrong. They were too cheerful, too eager, and the way they had been whispering lately, conversations that ended as soon as Matt walked in, now made his skin crawl. Just as Matt's thoughts spiraled, Ben slammed the brakes. "Whoa, look at that!" Ahead of them, hidden between the trees, stood an old, rotting wooden archway, overgrown with moss and ivy. Faint, weathered letters spelled out Riverdale Camp across the top. "We camping here?" Matt asked warily. "Nah, just thought it was cool," Ben said, reversing the Jeep with a sly grin. "Looks like this place shut down back in the 80s. Wanna explore it?" "Let's keep going," Matt muttered, his gut twisting. Ben and Izzy exchanged another one of their knowing glances but didn't argue. As the Jeep rumbled farther down the narrow trail, Matt felt his heart race. They were hiding something, and whatever it was, it involved this place. "You need to loosen up, Matt," Izzy teased, leaning closer. "We just want to have a good time. What's gotten into you?" Matt didn't respond. His hands balled into fists, and he kept his eyes glued to the forest outside. The dense canopy above blocked out most of the light, and the woods felt oppressive, like a physical weight pressing down on his chest. For days before this trip, he'd been having strange nightmares. Visions of being lost in a forest, screaming for help, but no one coming. Now, driving deeper into these woods, those dreams seemed more like a warning. "Right here," Ben said abruptly, yanking the wheel to take an even narrower path that wasn't on any map. Matt's stomach churned. His instincts screamed to get out. Asterisk now star. But confronting them would only make things worse. He couldn't risk revealing his suspicions, not yet. After another few minutes of tense silence, the Jeep rolled to a stop in a small clearing. The air felt heavy with moisture, and not a single bird or insect stirred. "This is it," Ben said cheerfully, stepping out of the car and stretching. "Perfect, right?" Izzy hopped out, grabbed her backpack, and winked at Matt. "Hope you're ready to unwind. No city noise to bother us out here." Matt gave a stiff nod, but the knot in his gut only tightened. Something was off, terribly off. And whatever was about to happen, there was no turning back now. As night fell, the forest was consumed by an impenetrable darkness, made heavier by the howling wind and relentless rain. The fire Ben and Matt had built from the last of the dry branches crackled furiously one moment and dimmed the next, forcing everyone to huddle closer to the warmth. Izzy sat comfortably by the fire, bundled up in her puffer jacket, while Ben warmed his hands over the flames. Matt sat a little off to the side, watching them from beneath his wet hood, anxiety creeping into his chest. "So, how about a bedtime story?" Izzy suddenly suggested, flashing a mischievous grin, as if she had something sinister in mind. Her eyes glinted in the dance of shadows. "I know one that'll make your hair stand on end." "Come on, Matt, don't chicken out," Ben teased, nudging him with his shoulder. "It's just a story." Matt pulled his hood further down, feeling the tension coil in his chest. There was something off about their looks. Too easy, too knowing, as if they were aware he didn't quite belong among them. "This happened a few years ago, not too far from here," Izzy began, her voice dropping to a soft, eerie tone as she tossed another stick into the fire. "A group of friends, just like us, went camping in the woods. One of the girls felt strange, like someone was watching them. But her friends just laughed it off, said it was nothing but nerves." Matt shifted, the cold sinking deeper into his bones. "But that night, after everyone fell asleep," Izzy continued, her voice now barely a whisper, "the girl heard someone calling her name outside her tent. She knew all her friends were asleep, yet the voice was right there, just on the other side of the thin tent wall." "And what happened?" Ben asked, playing along, though he already knew the story, feeding Matt's unease. "She was never seen again," Izzy said, pausing dramatically. "They found only her tent. But the worst part? Inside the tent were her friends, cut to pieces, with their eyes wide open, as if they were still staring at something." "That's enough," Matt said sharply, standing up. He didn't like the game they were playing. It felt like a message, like they were trying to confuse him, make him afraid. "What's the matter, Matt? Scared?" Izzy laughed, but there was something hollow in her laughter. "Just not in the mood," he muttered and made his way to his tent, leaving them by the fire. His heart pounded so hard it echoed in his ears. Lying on the damp mat inside his tent, Matt tried to calm himself, but every sound from outside felt threatening. The rain muffled everything, and the wind howled through the branches like ghostly whispers. Just as he started to drift off, he heard it. "He has no idea," Izzy whispered, her voice muffled, almost sinister. "Everything's going according to plan," Ben's quiet, confident voice confirmed. Matt froze, every muscle tensing. Their words crashed over him like a wave. Now everything made sense. They hadn't brought him here for nothing. They had planned this from the start. The voices fell silent, and the stillness that followed was even more unsettling, as if the whispers had been meant for him to overhear. Matt clenched his fists, his pulse racing with a mixture of panic, anger, and suspicion. They were planning something, and he wasn't going to sit around waiting for it to happen. He lay still, listening intently to the night, but even his own breathing sounded like a dangerous echo. Minutes passed in eerie silence, but instead of relief, fear churned in his gut. What if they were just waiting for the right moment? What if it was all going to happen tonight? And then he heard it, soft footsteps outside his tent. Someone was approaching, slowly, cautiously, almost silently, but the rain betrayed them. Matt held his breath, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife tucked beside his sleeping bag. The footsteps stopped. Someone was standing just outside his tent. The fabric of the tent shifted, and in the darkness, a shadow appeared. Someone was sticking their head inside. Matt gritted his teeth and lunged forward, slamming the stranger into the ground, his blade ready to strike. "Matt, stop. It's me, Ben. It's a joke." Ben's voice rasped, panicked. Matt froze, the blade hovering inches from Ben's chest. His heart pounded wildly, and for a moment, everything blurred before his eyes. "What the hell are you doing?" Matt barked, releasing Ben but keeping the knife in hand. Ben scrambled to his feet, panting, wiping sweat from his forehead. His face was pale with fear. He knew his stupid prank had almost cost him his life. I thought it would be funny. I wasn't thinking. I'm sorry, man. It was a dumb idea," Ben stammered, raising his hands in surrender. "Sorry, bro. It's all good now, right?" Matt didn't respond. He just stared, his mind still reeling with unease. Ben swallowed hard, muttering more apologies under his breath as he backed out of the tent and disappeared into the night. Left alone in the darkness, Matt gripped the knife so tightly his knuckles turned white. Anger and paranoia surged through him, the echo of a mocking voice swirling in his head. Asterisk, this isn't over. They're planning something. They'll make their move, you just wait. Asterisk, by the time the first rays of sunlight pierced the thick canopy, the tension in the camp was suffocating. Matt sat by the fire, his gaze distant and unblinking. Izzy and Ben exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the heavy shift in the air. "Hey, you okay?" Izzy asked hesitantly. "I'm fine," Matt replied curtly, not even looking at her. Ben slid closer, trying to ease the tension. "Look, Matt, I'm really sorry about last night. I didn't mean for it to go like that." Matt stayed silent, his jaw clenched tight. Every little thing, their voices, their glances, their very presence, grated on his nerves. Their apologies felt hollow, as if part of some bigger, twisted game. "Matt, we're all in this together," Izzy said carefully, her tone gentle. "No one's out to hurt you." "I know," Matt muttered, eyes fixed on the fire. But deep down he was certain. They're lying. The day dragged on painfully slow. Matt felt like a stranger among his so-called friends, as if he'd stumbled into an alternate world where everyone was against him. Izzy and Ben tried to act normal, but it only made his skin crawl more. "You know what? I'm gonna get some water," Izzy said abruptly, standing up in an attempt to avoid further tension. Matt watched her walk toward the river, a dark thought flashing through his mind. Asterisk, this is your chance. If they're planning something, you have to act first. Asterisk. Silently, he rose to his feet and followed her, the knife hidden in his pocket, his grip tightening with each step. Matt stood there, gritting his teeth, his breath deep and ragged. He felt waves of panic and adrenaline coursing through his veins. Every cell in his body screamed, "Act! Strike! They've betrayed you!" The darkness of the forest seemed endless. He silently slipped behind Izzy, who was walking toward the river with a water bottle in hand. The branches crackled under her feet, but her movements were carefree. She had no idea what awaited her in a moment. Matt felt the knife in his hand becoming a part of him, an extension of his rage. He glided forward like a ghost, suddenly finding himself behind her. "What are you planning?" he whispered, his voice trembling with hatred and fear. Izzy spun around, gazing into his eyes in surprise. "Matt, what are you talking about? We just wanted to." But her words dissolved into the hum that flooded his consciousness. Everything became blurred and unimportant. Everything except the knife in his hand. "Strike first, or they will strike you." He lunged at her, and the blade glinted in the darkness. The first cut sliced through the fabric of her hoodie and sank into the soft flesh of her abdomen. Izzy gasped, dropping the bottle, which hit the ground with a heavy thud. Her hands instinctively clutched the wound, but Matt could no longer stop. "Matt, why?" she gasped, choking on the pain. Her eyes widened, filled with shock and despair. Matt remained silent. He felt his hand rise and fall again and again. The blade plunged deep, tearing through muscle and skin, each thrust inflicting irreparable damage. Her blood splattered and flowed over his hands, sticking to his fingers and the knife. Matt felt her warmth, but it no longer mattered. Izzy writhed in agony, whimpering like a wounded animal. Her hands weakly reached out to him, as if pleading for mercy. But Matt no longer saw a friend in her, only a threat that needed to be eradicated. "You betrayed me," he whispered in her ear as her body helplessly slumped to the ground. Those words, spoken softly and coldly, sounded like a death sentence. When Izzy stopped moving, Matt finally straightened up, breathing heavily. He wiped the knife on her clothes and slowly made his way back to the camp, where his final enemy awaited him. Ben sat by the fire, tossing branches into the flames, oblivious to the approaching death. Matt emerged from the forest, covered in bloodstains. "Where's Izzy?" Ben asked, surprised, looking up. His face initially showed disbelief, then slowly shifted to fear as he saw the bloody knife in his friend's hands. "She's not coming," Matt replied coldly, stepping closer. Ben jumped to his feet, realizing that something terrible had happened. "Matt, what have you done?" But Matt no longer heard his words. He saw only the one who was to become his next victim. Ben turned to run, moving as fast as he could, but panic made his movements clumsy. He tripped over a tree root and fell, hitting the ground hard. Matt rushed to him, grabbing his shoulder and roughly pinning him to the ground. Ben gasped in fear. "Matt, please. It was a surprise. We wanted to surprise you. We meant no harm." His voice was frantic and full of desperation. But all Matt heard was the unbearable noise in his head and the pounding of his own heart. "You wanted to destroy me," he whispered, and the knife came down. The first thrust pierced Ben's ribs, but Matt didn't stop. He struck again and again, feeling nothing but the pulsating rage. Blood sprayed everywhere, covering his hands, face, and clothes. Matt felt Ben's body convulsing beneath him, his hands flailing helplessly in the last throes of agony. But Matt continued. Each strike echoed his fears, his image, and paranoia. He hit until the body beneath him became still, and the ground beneath them turned into a bloody mire. When everything finally fell silent, Matt sat beside his bloodied friend's body, gasping from exhaustion. He tossed the knife aside and looked at his trembling hands. They shook not from fear or remorse. He felt empty. "I won," flashed through his mind. A dead silence hung over the camp, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Matt sat in that silence, staring at the glowing embers, and for the first time felt true emptiness. Matt was breathing heavily, wiping his bloodied hands on his jeans, when suddenly his gaze fell on Ben's backpack lying nearby. A small box tumbled out from the torn zipper, as if fate itself was trying to remind him of something important. Matt leaned down, his fingers trembling as he picked it up from the ground. He opened the box and saw a bracelet with an engraving. "Hang in there, bro. We're always with you." His hands trembled even more, and he almost dropped it. Inside the box was also a photo. It showed the three of them, Matt, Izzy, and Ben, smiling like in those carefree days when they were best friends. On the back, it was neatly written, "We love you, Matt. Happy birthday." The world before his eyes blurred. His chest tightened as if someone had thrown a stone on it. This was not a trap, not a betrayal. They just wanted to surprise him. He had responded with a knife. He had destroyed his closest friends in a blind panic. Matt felt something break inside him once and for all. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't notice. His gaze froze on the bloodied bodies. Izzy curled up on the ground, and Ben, who lay exactly where Matt had dealt the final blow. A wave of guilt washed over him, drowning out whatever was left of his consciousness. But he knew he couldn't leave them like this. Matt rose on trembling legs and dragged his friends' bodies to the clearing where they had set up camp. They felt heavy, and with each step, his heart constricted even more. He carefully laid them side by side, as if afraid to inflict any more pain on them, though that was already impossible. He sat next to their bodies, wiping sweat and blood from his face. Before him lay Izzy and Ben, dead but together just like in that photo. For a few moments, he simply sat there, staring at them, as if hoping they would wake up any moment and this would all turn out to be a horrible nightmare. But there was no one left to wake up. Matt took a deep breath and lifted the knife he was still holding. He looked one last time at the photo from the box, and his voice, strained and hoarse, barely escaped his lips. "Forgive me." He brought the blade to his chest and struck, strong and precise. Pain pierced his body, but he felt not so much physical pain as a release from the unbearable weight of guilt. His body trembled, blood flowed from the wound, soaking the photo in his hand. He leaned forward and collapsed to the ground next to his friends. As dawn illuminated the forest, 3 motionless bodies remained on the ground. Matt, Izzy, and Ben lay side by side, just like in that photo, but this time for good. The forest, silent and indifferent, absorbed their last breaths, leaving only an empty clearing and memories that could never be undone. Start by liking the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what you want the next story to be about. And remember, every choice can lead to irreversible consequences.